Welcome to the Elephant Feast. I'm your host, Jordan Johnson, and at this table we are talking about the complexities of life, faith, and relationships one bite at a time. So pull up a seat. Welcome to the table. All right, folks. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about story. Story is the oldest and most effective tool for data transmission. Let that sink in. Everything that we do in communication must involve story in order for it to last, for it to be memorable, for it to have effect in our world. Let's just think about it for a second. Marketing. Marketing is the story of how a product can fulfill the need that you have or make you believe that you have a need that you didn't know you had prior. Politics. Politics is a story that you tell to get things done in order for society to function. Now, some of you guys may disagree with that, but essentially all political platforms and campaigns, they are storytelling exhibitions in order to get the most amount of people to buy in to one person's particular view of how things should be. Religion is simply the story of what does it mean to be human, or how do we figure out how life works, or even the story of how humanity interacts with the divine, and what does that mean for our daily lives. Let's keep going. Self-concept. Your story is very much also your identity. So if someone says to you, what is your story? They're also asking is, what is your identity? What makes you you, and how did you get here? Even science. Science is facts and data organized into a story. Because once again, without the story, it's just data that doesn't mean anything. It's just stuck out there. It's facts. But the facts don't move you anywhere unless it's organized into a story. Story ultimately provides meaning and movement to the human experience. And story has always been core to humanity, and today we have more stories than ever before. Okay, all the streaming platforms, movies, TV, radio, podcasts, art, VR, so many things out there telling good and compelling stories. And yet, even though story is an all-time high, also loneliness is at an all-time high, which is interesting. It's kind of a paradox. You would think that with more voices being heard and more stories being told and more connection going out everywhere, you would think that loneliness would be at an all-time low, but the reality is, we are a lonely people, even though we have more information than ever before, and more ways for our voices to be heard as well. So what's going on with that? Well, so we are in a postmodern society. And once again, as a person of the Christian faith, I'm not threatened by this idea, but I think it's important for us to understand what's going on here. So there are some complications that postmodern society brings to the storytelling table. For instance, what a big idea is that meta-narratives are not really favored anymore in a postmodern society. So, the big stories so think like any of the origin stories or the cultural myths of a civilization. These were these big stories that everyone knew and everyone shared and everyone told because they were distinct to that culture and it gave that culture meaning. Now in a postmodern society, because all cultures are in here together, the distinctive cultural stories are just getting lost in favor of the multitude coming in. And so big meta-narratives aren't as useful anymore just because the cultures have been blended so much. A quantity over quality approach. Multiple smaller stories or multiple smaller truths are better than one big orienting truth. I don't believe that postmodernism is this assault against truth. It is more or less refracting truth into as many different prisms of light as possible, if that makes sense. Like thinking like the big truth, but then putting it in a kaleidoscope so it's showing up in a bunch of different places, some more helpful than others. But it's a quantity over quality approach to storytelling. And a lot of this is due because we have a lower trust in our institutions, okay? Government, churches, big organizations, big corporations, even human institutions like parenting and marriage and all these things. Their volume has been turned down low on these big institutions because, once again, with all the cultures coming together, these big institutions that were kind of holding space and dictating what the stories are and the flow and where culture is going, they just don't have room anymore because all the churches, all the corporations, all the parenting, but then also because we have so much information now that we're seeing the dirty side, the ugly side, the scandalous side. So we don't necessarily look at major institutions with the 100% that's my guy kind of thing. So low trust plus overwhelming options equal the most important truth is what I determine to be true to my story. So once again, we're not talking about this sense of I want to determine what I want to because I want to. It's more or less, it's always falling to the story. And this is where it's important for us to dial in our focus, because this is going to dictate where we go in our series when we talk about the story arc of Scripture. Postmodernism is an orienting story, and its chief value is to choose your own adventure because you can't fully trust anything that doesn't come from yourself, resulting in the perception that you are the main character, and then everyone else must be a supporting character, a villain, or a prop to your own story, which leads us to why I believe we have so many stories, but yet everyone is still lonely because everyone is a main character of their own story. And that is dictating how they relate to others. So we have this phenomenon here because of the internet. We are able to connect with people across hemispheres and have a very narrow list of people that we would qualify as friends because they hit these markers of what I most prefer in my friends. They could be local, they could be far away, doesn't matter. I choose my friends. But then also part of that anxiety is the high stakes of choosing the right story. Okay, so think about Baskin-Robbins, 31 flavors. There's this phenomenon out there called the tyranny of choice. And so a person who is happy will go into Baskin-Robbins, look at all the flavors they have to offer, and then become less and less happy because the anxiety of, will I choose the right flavor or my favorite flavor, then comes into question because you have 31 different flavors to choose from rather than 4 or 5. Okay? So the same thing is being applied to how we tell our stories and the truths that we align ourselves to. Now, because there's so many, the reality is that we are afraid that we will choose the wrong one or not find the correct one with enough time to do anything about it. Because after all, in our Western culture, one of the chief sins is to waste time. So we don't want to waste time trying to figure out who we are. We want to know who we are by picking the story, by picking the friends, and picking the narrative that we want to live out. But it's not that simple. So what about solutions? Well, I have some solutions. A solution that we're going to be talking about in this series is that a story arc that orients humanity is needed, where everyone can be a main character but also the characters participate in something bigger. Then it's no longer a reality TV drama. Then the story becomes a quest. Then the movement that humanity needs is now in play. See, an orienting story needs to be strong enough to bear the weight of everyone's story. It needs to be broad enough that anyone can enter into it. Think like a river system. You have the main river flowing down, but then you have tributaries coming in and joining into the river. And no matter how many tributaries plug into that river, the river stays constant, right? And then an orienting story needs to give direction, growth, and hope. Okay, so we already talked about the direction. The story needs to be big enough that everyone who enters in gets aligned and moves in the same direction. And that's going to lead to growth. That's going to lead to maturity. That's going to lead to discovery. That's going to lead to curiosity satisfied. And then what we think about next is this idea of hope. A hopeless society is a society that is stagnant and it does not progress. So think about, like right now, declining birth rates is a very real situation that a lot of countries are dealing with. Massive epidemics of depression and anxiety that is going up, and it shows no sign of going down anytime soon. But then also we have this hyper tribalism that is just ripping across society through the internet and in personal spaces. And these things happen when hope is unsure. Okay? You don't know if you want to bring kids into the world. You don't know how to handle reality as well. And you don't know who's going to attack you, so you need to align with the people who you know may be safe. And this is what happens when hope gets turned down. So an orienting story must be orienting towards hope. So direction, growth, and hope. And this is why we're going to be bringing into the story of the Bible. Yes, I know, I'm biased. I get that. But hear me out. Let's look at this perhaps in a different way than what we've seen. Because a story arc of Scripture is not going to redefine everything. Okay, we're not talking about secret undiscovered knowledge, but we are talking about a way of taking what is familiar to you and placing a frame on it so that you can see something that you may not have seen before. But without that orienting story, your story becomes the story. And not only does it make for bad storytelling, but it affects how you interpret the Bible as well. So think about this. Bad Bible interpretation can have disastrous results. Okay? And we get bad Bible interpretation from bad reading of the Bible. So a bad reading with bad interpretation will produce bad theology, which leads to harm that is further complicated by God's approval because it's based upon the Bible. But it's not. It's based upon your interpretation, which is based upon how you entered into the story of the Bible. So this is not just like a personal exercise of your personal devotions. This has effects for people, for groups of people, which is why it's important for us to maintain that view. It has to give direction, it has to give growth, and it has to give hope as well. Okay, so many of you guys may have heard of a story arc before. Creation, fall, redemption, restoration. That's kind of how I was introduced to a story arc within Scripture. Okay, so Genesis 1 and 2 is creation. Genesis 3 all the way to the beginning of Matthew is fall. And then you have redemption, which is the Gospels, I'm guessing. And then restoration, which is the book of Revelation. So the New Testament letters, I'm not sure if they're more in redemption or in restoration. This is kind of part of the problems that I think that we can do better than just a 4-beat story arc. So what I want to do is introduce a 6-beat story arc based upon Gustav Freytag's story pyramid that he developed in the 1860s. Okay, and it's going to go through setting, conflict, rising action, climax, falling action, and then ending with resolution. Now, before we get started, I do want to be really clear. This is not some secret knowledge that I have discovered that I'm making available to you for a few small payments of a very expensive fee. No, we're not doing that here. The story arc is not divine revelation. More or less, it's an exercise in wisdom from the writers of the Bible who knew how to tell stories, and then modern people recognizing the storytelling tools and saying, I see what they're doing here. Okay, so what is a good comparison to what the story arc is it's very close to like chapter and verses in the Bible. Okay, chapters and verses were not native to the Bible. They were added in later, around the 1530s, I believe, is when they were finally completed. But they were added so that people could figure out where you are in Scripture pretty quickly, and everyone's kind of centralized and located in the same place. Chapter and verses are so helpful to us in reading the Bible that even though they are not native to Scripture, we still use them as a tool of wisdom to help us understand. That's the same thing we're talking about here with the story arc. It is a tool of wisdom that if you take the story arc and you lay it over the Bible, it's going to help you with your interpretation because it's going to give you some rules of which to follow. It's also going to give you some things that you're going to be looking to expect from the story, and it also gives you kind of a premise so that you can be surprised by what is unexpected, because the Bible does have a lot of plot twists and turns within it. And so if you know the rules of what to expect, now the Bible has something else to surprise you with. So as you join me on this journey, I'll be so happy to walk through this. This has made my reading of the Bible not only more enjoyable, but kind of more fascinating in a way. Once again, it's not like a life-changing thing, but it is a tool. It's like, okay, the Bible is really cool. Just having a few little things in the back pocket to reference and just kind of look off of. Anyways, we're starting to ramble now, so we're going to bring it to a close. So next episode, we're going to get into the story arc, beginning with the setting. So thank you guys for joining me here today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time at the table of the Elephant Feast.